Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My glasses are really dirty. Give me a second. That's much better. So welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the vlog. We are not going to do a weekly vlog this video. I am in the mood for a themed reading vlog. I haven't done one since last year. I wanted to cut back on them because sometimes they do take a while, and if you're reading a set of books that are similar, like they tend to be in themed reading vlogs, and you kind of get burned out, or at least I get a little burned out. But I have been in the mood to read romance, something that gets me, like giggling and like twirling my hair and stuff. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do this reading vlog. I don't have a set TBR though. I will quickly look through like my shelves and the library, Kindle Unlimited. I might actually just focus on Kindle Unlimited just because I don't know how long I'll have it. Much longer. I am currently reading one book. It's called Tested by Lindsay Broker. This is the 4th book in the Legacy of Magic series. I've talked about the series multiple times already in like past videos, but this is a sequel series. Never read the original series, but this is a series, an urban fantasy, and we follow a character named Maddie who is half dwarf, half human. Her human side is Samoan, and she renovates houses for a living, flips them, that kind of thing. When she was younger, her mother allegedly passed away, and her father was arrested by like the army, and he's in like army jail or something. Now in her older age, she's like in her early 30s, Maddie's kind of questioning what happened to her mother and all that kind of stuff. So it's mostly focused on finding out what happened to her mother, but we have like friends and other drama and romance as well. So I'm not going to count this technically for the romance vlog, but just letting you know I'm currently reading this, and when I get finished with that, I will like actually start reading romance. So this one is like a good chunk of this does have romance between Maddie and her love interest. So technically, I mean, it's gonna be part of the vlog because I already mentioned it, but it's not part of like the romance of it all. Maybe. No, it's fine. I'll read 5 other books. But yeah, welcome to the vlog. Okay, sorry for the poor lighting. It's kind of cloudy today. We're also heading into the afternoon, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm currently reading Delilah Green Doesn't Care, I think is what it's called, by Ashley Herring Blake. Fairly popular book on Book Talk, fairly popular queer book. I have about an hour left of reading. This book is about Delilah Green, who is fairly estranged from her step family in her small town. She lives in New York. She's a photographer, but she's going back to her small town to participate in her stepsister's wedding and family drama, which I enjoy reading, like family drama, but it's also romance. And she kind of starts this relationship up with one of the maid of honors, or the maid of honor, one of the brides, whatever. I'm enjoying it so far. It's a good mix of like outside forces being dramatic and also like our characters having some internal struggles, some growth incoming, which I think is a good balance. I prefer outside drama as opposed to internal struggles. Internal struggles are kind of like boring to me. I don't really have great time reading them, even though I know that like they're more realistic to have like a trepidation going into relationships, especially for our main character Delilah, who's gone out of a long-term relationship somewhat recently, and so she's mostly been in casual flings. Are you really gonna start barking at me? I would say right now I'm at a 4-star, but I think we'll see how I feel after I finish. Say goodbye. So I did finish Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake, and I did really enjoy it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Same things that I said about this book before still apply. I think that this was fun. I think this was really well executed. Everything that was put in the book, like everything that was written down and published, felt like it had a point. I usually don't give this critique for fantasy books, because I don't care, like, not that I don't care, but for fantasy books I don't really mind if the author drones on and takes a long time with like world building. But with contemporary books, that's a different story. I know that in romances there's going to be a little bit of an internal struggle for some characters to like accept the love that is being given to them, But then there might be also some external factors, like Delilah does not live in the same like small town as her love interest. She lives in New York, so you know, a mix of that. But it can get very exhausting if it's like, oh, I don't know if I should be in this relationship, I don't know, like it's very like, we get it, girl, just go for it. After they kind of got over this major hurdle that each of the Delilah and Claire had, they moved past that, and you know, happily ever after and that kind of thing. I will say that I was writing in my book journal about my thoughts about this book, and I was like, yeah, we only had Delilah's POV, so I really only connected with her. I feel like the author could have tried harder to tried harder for me to like Claire. But then I kind of stopped and I was like, oh wait, we do get like Claire's like limited third person POV. I just forgot it because I don't know, I didn't really connect to Claire as much. 4 stars, still pretty good. It is sapphic and I would still like recommend. It's like a very popular like book talk book, so it's not like it needs like another recommendation, but I did enjoy it. I'm usually late to read popular books, which you'll see in my next read, which is Deal with the Elf King by Elise Kova. Elise Kova, I think, is the author's name. I read her before. I read her Air Awakens series, which is like a YA. Oh, I have lipstick. I read this author before. I read her Air Awakens series and then her sequel series, which is called like Vortex Chronicles. But she wrote this during the pandemic. And I started it and I am really enjoying it. Something that I noticed with my past experiences with this author is that when the fantasy starts getting a little bit more dense, a little bit more bigger, a little bit more details, that's where she kind of loses me. Her Air Awaken series was so fun. It was very dramatic. It was YA, so it was a good mix of like drama and like romance, and I had a good time. But then her sequel series got a little more in depth with like magic, and like a bunch of other stuff started happening, and it kind of felt like she was throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticked. It was a lot, and I think she does better when it isn't so dense. But this is about a human woman who lives in a small town that's kind of like on the edge, kind of connects to like this elf realm, I guess, and they kind of benefit from their proximity to the elf realm. There's also a deal in place where elves take a human woman to be their human queen for reasons, and it's kind of explained. And she's a healer, and as you can probably imagine, she will be taken by the elves to be their human queen. I think that's pretty much it, and she's just been taken, so I'm not that far along, but I am very okay with this so far. I have nothing major problems with. I will come back when I have something else to add. Okay, so I do have a little bit of a reading update. Let me kind of just fix this mess. I finished 2 things. I didn't want to finish multiple things before I gave an update, but I did. I finished A Deal with the Elf King by Elise Kova, and this one started off fairly well. Like I said before, our main character is chosen to be like the human queen for the elves, and she has to go to the elf world. It's called Midscape, and live there and like charge the land and like breathe life into it. It's a Hades and Persephone retelling, and I do really like the way the author incorporated that myth into this romance. Sometimes, and this is no shade to anybody else, but sometimes Hades and Persephone retellings are literally just like some death god or death something is interested in like a very like nice young woman or whatever, and like that's it. I do like how the actual myth was incorporated, and like spring versus winter and all that kind of stuff. Our main character, like other than the romance, our main character wants to break the cycle of elf kings having to take a human woman to be his queen, because there's some dangerous stuff, like there's some aspects of it that is unhealthy for the human queen. I don't want to get into it, but like there's a little bit of a plot as well. That fantasy plot does kind of, we tackle it really quickly and just like get back to the romance, which I assume is like the point. I don't really understand the term romantasy. Like I don't know how different that is than a fantasy romance. Maybe someone can explain to me in the comments. But if romantasy is supposed to be like more focused on the romance than fantasy, then I guess this is it. Again, I don't know like the qualifications, or if it's just like a term or like a shortened term, I don't know. But this was mostly romance Of course, there were like hints at world building and like other magical stuff, but it's mostly the romance. And it was okay at the beginning, but this is something that maybe it's a me thing and not necessarily an author thing, but I tend to struggle with romance and like keeping my attention and keeping like the believability, or you know, like I struggle continuing to be interested in this couple once they get past the yearning. Like once they're actually kind of getting into admitting their feelings for one another, that's kind of when I lose interest. But I don't know if that's a me thing, or maybe some authors don't do it as well in you know, than compared to other authors. But once they got past the I'm kind of into this person and they were actually getting romantic, I was like, it's okay. So I gave it 3.5 stars. It started off well. I do think that the author teased enough about the rest of the world that I might be interested in reading the companion novels, because this is the first in like a companion novel series. I think the next one is called like something with a Fae Prince, Dance with a Fae Prince, something like that. And there's also one with like a vampire lord, and I think there's like a wolf one and like a siren one, but it's fantasy romance. There's like hints of spice, but I would not say this is spicy. This is like bottom, like tier 1 spice, which is fine, because sometimes like I'm not always in the mood for it, especially because, side note, sometimes when authors want to write a very spicy novel, they tend to just head straight to the spice, and they kind of, I don't really buy the romance. So this one was better about it. I did finish another book, and that was not my intention. I would like to give more updates, but this one was really short and I didn't know it was going to be short, so I picked it up after I finished the Elise Kova book, and I read through it in like a couple of hours. I take breaks in between. It was really quick. It was called The Companion by Ottoman. This is not one that I hear too much talk about, but it's still really well liked from what I saw of reviews. This one was really cute and cozy. I would say this qualifies as a cozy read. There are definitely hints at like transphobia and stuff, so keep that in mind if that's something that might bother you in your reading. But I would say this is like mostly cozy. There's really little, like, there's no high stakes at all. It's very like slice of life. In this little short novella, we follow a character named Madeline, and she has been wanting to break into the writing scene in New York, and there are no opportunities for her, or the opportunities that do arise from her, she's not biting. Sometimes the publishing world can be very predatory, and she doesn't want any of that. So a friend of hers like hooks her up with this other person who needs like a companion to live with, because he's a little bit of a shut-in. And Madeline's like, okay, that sounds great. He's also an author, writer, so Madeline's supposed to be like just like a companion for him, and they kind of hit it off. There's a little bit of like, you know, feelings there, but she also meets her new neighbor who lives in the farm like next door, and they also hit it off. This is a trans polyamory story. All the characters are trans. We have 2 trans women and then 1 trans man, and it is the cutest thing ever. Like, I absolutely adored this. One thing that I really liked, and touching on spice, and I know spice is very subjective for some people, authors really want to go from 0 to 100 like really quickly with spice, even if the character is like inexperienced, never had a partner. It's like 0 to corn hub production, and it's a lot, and it's fine if that's what you want to read and that's like what you're in the mood for. But sometimes I feel like slower, compassionate, like, is this okay, can I do that, especially if these characters are trans and getting comfortable with their bodies and stuff like that. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was so sweet and compassionate and slow and sweet. And then obviously when they got more comfortable, it got a little more spicier, I guess. But I really loved the growth of that. And it's still a short novella, but I thought the way the author developed the intimate moments was also fantastic, as well as like the relationship between the characters. I thought it was the cutest thing ever. It would take you, if you want to do it in one sitting, maybe like an hour and a half. Very quick read. I would like to check out more from this author. This is like, oh, it's also set after World War II, but I would say, like, if you are not into historical romances, I think this is a really like easy one to get in. One, because it's short. It doesn't really read too historical. Sometimes authors try to like lean into like the time period. This one doesn't. Like sometimes I forget that this was like the 1940s. Everything feels kind of like modern despite the time period. I really recommend this if you want to read a little bit more historical romance. If you're only a fantasy, there's something very whimsy and fantasy about this, even though it's not, there's like no magic or anything like that. Yeah, I really like this one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And the last update, I started reading Sanctuary with Kings by Kathryn Moon. This is the 3rd book in the Tempting Monsters series. I'm gonna be a little bit vague when I talk about the series. I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, just in case if you want to read it. They're kind of companions, but they do follow chronological order. I would not read them out of order unless you really want to and you don't really care about the plot. I would say this is one of the more explicit spicier romances. I know I said sometimes I'm not in the mood for them, but I was last night. And yes, this is the 3rd book in a historical paranormal urban fantasy series. It's set in England. I want to say Victoria's on the throne, so late 1800s. It's set in a world where monsters exist. We've met like a Jekyll Hyde character in the 1st book. We've seen like shifters, we've seen minotaurs, anything kind of fantastical related, mythological. We're getting hints of Arthurian stuff in this one. Each book we follow a different female character, and they're why choose romances, so multiple partners by the end of the book, happily ever after. The first one was probably my favorite. Had some of, again, this is all subjective, but had some of my favorite scenes that I've read. Very creative, very well written as well. I think something about the series that kind of took me by surprise is when I read, and this is no offense, but when I read Kindle Unlimited books, sometimes authors have that fan fiction writing where they're telling you how you should feel about a character, which is fine for fan fiction because you already know the characters, presumably, if depending on the fandom that you're reading and how well you like it, that kind of stuff. But sometimes you don't know your characters and they're not established enough. This author does a very good job of establishing characters and worlds and, you know, communities and stuff like that, and she does it well enough and doesn't kind of sacrifice the spice of it all. Sometimes books that are very spicy can read very, what's the word I'm looking for, over the top and dramatic and kind of cringy at times, depending on like language and what's used. But I think this author does a good job of keeping with the historical vibe of it all and still having that in line with the spice. I've read a few of her other stuff, but I think she kind of excels in this area. This is the 3rd book, so I don't want to spoil plot, but essentially there's a bad guy that we've known about for a few books already, and the character that we're following in this book was under his control for quite some time, and she's free now. I'll leave it at that. So yeah, that's what I'm currently reading. I will come back when I have something to talk about. So I have a little bit of an update. I did finish reading Sanctuary with Kings by Kathryn Moon. This book almost put me in a little bit of a slump. I'm not gonna lie, it's been a while since my last update, just because reading this was just taking a toll on me, and I had to like stop in the middle of it and read something completely different. I read like YA contemporary just to like cleanse the palate a little bit, but I did eventually finish this. This is over 450 pages for a romance that is mostly spicy content, and this has probably been the most disappointing read, and it probably will be the most disappointing read in this vlog because I've already picked up the next book I'm reading, and I'll get to that soon. But this one was the most disappointing just because I've read this author's work before. I've read the first 2 books in this series before. It is a trilogy, so this was the last book. I think she might write other books in this universe, but the main arc is done. Like I said before, we're following a character that has recently escaped captivity. She's half divine. Her mother is the goddess Hedon. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but that's her thing. And she kind of lives off of ecstasy or feelings of, you know, that kind of thing. A majority of the content is very spicy. It is a why choose. by 50% I was already like super done with this book. I got what I needed and I didn't want to continue, but since I do like this author and their writing, I was like, I'll keep reading it. But at that point I did have to take a break and read something completely different. If this book was mostly just focused on the romance and the spice, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but this author did also want to have like an actual like plot, like a story to go along with the spice, which is not usually authors sacrifice one for another. Like in the earlier book I read in this vlog, Deal with the Elf King, the plot outside of the romance in that book was pretty quick and like quickly dealt with. And this one, the author did want to give both storylines their time to shine, which is fine, but it just made the book longer. And I don't know, either cut some of the spice or get to the point of the fantasy plot, because at some point it felt like there was too much spice. And maybe that's just me. Maybe if you're very like, you mostly read spicy books, this is not a big deal for you, but I don't just read spicy books. So at some point I was like, okay, I'm done with the spice. Like I don't need it anymore, because at some point it just felt like we were having spice to like have something to like fill space. Like if the spice wasn't to build character relationships or for some plot reason or something, it was just there. Any reason to have characters have their intimate moments with, you know, wake up in the morning, intimate moments, go eat breakfast, intimate moment on the table, go train, you know, sword practice or whatever, have an intimate moment in the gym or whatever. Like it was just a ton of spice and I was just like tired of it. It was just a lot. It was just a lot to get through and I was really tired of the spice. Maybe it was a me thing, but this one did not live up to the standards that I had. So I gave it like a 2.5. I also didn't really like fall in love with any of the characters or grow attached to any of the love interests. So it kind of just felt like I was just reading strangers have like a ton of sex like all the time. Anyways, it was okay, like right down the middle, a 2.5. I'd still read from this author because like I said before, I do like their writing and it doesn't feel like he ever gets sacrificed for the spice. If that's one constant thing in this book, in the series, is that the writing is still fairly consistent. Sometimes, and I don't know if I was clear about it before, sometimes in the spicier moments the writing gets very like cringy, at least to me. I'm not a big talker during spicy moments, like I don't really like that. So when it's like, you like that kind of stuff, I'm like, ugh, like just shut up, do what you're doing. Like I don't need you to start talking, monologuing through like this whole thing. But I did pick up my next book, which was last night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda Lo. I've seen this around before and I meant to pick it up earlier. I've heard good things about this one. This takes place during the 1950s, mid 1950s, during the McCarthy era, the Red Scare, where the United States is on its high moments of anti like communism, and anything that is like vaguely, not even vaguely, but just like anything could be hinted at communist is like under intense scrutiny. Our main character is Chinese American. Anything Chinese is like thought to be like super like communist, so it's not like a great moment in history for Chinese people or anyone that's like not like purebred American or whatever. We follow her character in high school. She's a senior. Her name is Lily, and she forms a bond with one of her classmates named Kathleen, I believe is her name. They have similar interests, and I believe, I'm not too far along in this, but I believe they go to like a queer club in San Francisco, and they live in Chinatown, or she lives in Chinatown. I think Kathleen's a white girl, but they go to like a queer club one night, and yeah, coming of age queer like lesbian story. I believe there's also more on the side of like immigration and like Chinese xenophobia, racism, and things like that. So I am like super looking forward to finishing the rest of this one. I don't know how long it'll take. This one's actually shorter than Sanctuary with Kings, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, we're almost done with the vlog. Just need to finish up this book and then I'll wrap this up, and then I'll probably do like a book haul later, because I have 2 of these cubbies up here full of books that I need to haul. So yeah, so you probably can't tell from my face, but I just finished crying because I read or finished reading Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda. This is the last book of the vlog, so before I sign out, let me just go through my thoughts and feelings about this one. I loved it. This is the best book here. Unfortunately, I would say this one doesn't quite get as romantic, though there's definitely romance, don't get me wrong. The romance in this book is not the main goal or the only thing that the author is trying to portray in this book. Like I said before, this takes place during a historical moment in time, and I hope I gave enough details for you, but if you don't know, the author also just put a lot of historical historical background at the end of the book if there are some things that you still don't quite understand about this time period, if you're not American or you just don't know. I think it was also really important for this author to set this time period in the book, as well as give cultural nuance and give different characters of Chinese descent their time to shine in this book. So getting that culture on the page as well as the historical aspects on the page does kind of distract from the romance. Not to say that there's no romance, because there is. If you're getting into historical romance, for example, this could be a great place to start, because it does at parts really want you to focus on the romance before anything else. But like I said, I absolutely love this, and when I say I cry when reading books, just know that I am just a very emotional person when I pick up a book. In real life, you can't really get me to cry, but give me a book and yes, I can. So yeah, I gave this 5 stars. I loved it. Going back to the romance, I think the romance itself was probably the most seamless, fell into place aspect of this book, taking away all the anti-Chinese, anti-communist, homophobic, lesbophobic content that our characters live in. The girls coming together and expressing their feelings for one another was quite simple and straightforward. There was no am I really in love with her? I don't know. Should we? It was never kind of a diddle daddle like that. It was very much I like you, you like me, and we will be together. Despite anything else going on, we will. And I really appreciated that. The romance was never will they, won't they? They definitely wanted to be together, and I love that personally. One thing about romances that does kind of tire me out is the internal struggle of not even just in queer romances, but even in straight romances where the character's oh, I don't know, I really love this person or not, I'm not sure. These characters 100% knew, even if they're young, they knew that they had intense feelings for one another, and I really appreciated that we got straight to that. We didn't have to diddle daddle. I do want to mention, because I feel, and I haven't really seen this in reviews, but I do know that there is this kind of belief of authors kind of being accused of the bad things in books that they're trying to portray. And just to get ahead of that, our character does use certain verbiage that would have been reflective of the time. We don't use the word today, we use Asian Americans, but the words Oriental to describe a person is still present in this book, and other verbiage and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind. That was very important to the author. There were a few flashbacks that I understand why they were there. They were a little bit lackluster because I didn't think they were needed. We have flashbacks from our main character's mother and her aunt throughout this book to kind of just help set the scene, understand where these people are coming from as Asians living in the United States. I get that and I appreciate that, but I feel it didn't bring enough to the table that wasn't already present in the present tense narrative. It was nice to see Grace is Lily's mother and her perspective when she was a young woman. I did wish we got more of Lily's aunt though, because Lily's aunt works at the Jet Propulsion Lab. I think she was a calculator, I want to say. She was a big influence for Lily's future and goals. Lily also wants to work at the Jet Propulsion Lab and help get people into the space, into outer space, into the stars. This is YA, if I didn't already make that clear, but I would say it kind of leans into older YA. And I also really appreciated that a big part of the story is set in this queer club called the Telegraph Club. If you're not familiar with queerness in the United States and its relationship to nightclubs, feel free to look it up, but the author does provide some of that historical background in the book, like in the afterword. As you can tell, I obviously really enjoyed this book. Not completely shocking that of the romances in this one, this is more of a blended romance with historical aspects as well as like a coming of age type thing, which I always appreciate. But I did have other successful reads in this vlog. I had Delilah Green, which is a great contemporary romance. I also had The Companion, which is also another historical romance with like trans main characters. So yeah, that's the end of the vlog. I hope that you enjoyed watching this. It did take me a little while to like film this and get all the books out of the way, because one did kind of put me into a slump, but it is what it is. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Let me know if you've read any of these books. If you haven't, if I piqued your interest or you disliked any of these, that'd be also great to see down below. I will also link my social medias as well as some far more important links down below. Feel free to like, dislike, comment, or subscribe, or do neither. It's all cool with me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.